Let's talk about early intervention today and why it is so important. Back when Sadie was little, I had this vague suspicion that she probably didn't have as many words as your typical 2-year-old. And by the time she was 3, it was pretty apparent that she did not have as many words as your typical 3-year-old because she really didn't have very many words at all. She had some sounds that were really approximations of words. We called them words, but they were not words that anyone outside of our immediate family really recognized. And there were not very many of them. I mean, she had more words than Tessie has, but not very many. She did not talk very much. And at the time, I just kept thinking that she would catch up. Everyone kept saying that it was because we had 4 generations of family living near each other. She had her great-grandparents there, her grandparents, Paula and I, and Sadie. And that so she never really needed anything. She didn't need to talk. Everything was done for her. And so no one was really concerned that she didn't speak, or she didn't speak much, really. Then Maggie came along, and Maggie was really the same way. And so then I just started to think maybe our kids just talk late. Maggie didn't seem that different from Sadie. In fact, they had a lot in common. They both had a lot of sensory seeking issues. And so to me, that just sort of confirmed that it was normal. Our girls are just late talkers, and that was that. And then Maggie was diagnosed with autism when she was 3, which honestly, it's probably surprising that it wasn't later, considering how resistant I was to the idea that there was anything wrong. That was in great part because I really, really wanted to homeschool. By the time Patrick came along, I was much more alert about things like speech delays. And when Patrick was around a year old and he didn't have any words, I was very, very, very aware of that. I remember taking him to our pediatrician, getting a referral to early on, which I actually didn't need. I could have just gone on the website and self-referred, but I went in first and talked to the pediatrician, who confirmed that he should have some words by then. He wasn't exactly 1. He was pretty behind by then. I don't remember exactly what the delay was. It had to be more than 20% for him to qualify for early services. Early on is what it's called here. And he definitely qualified. So a speech therapist started coming to our house, and then we also started going to an early on playgroup that was walking distance from our house. We would walk Maggie to therapy, and then we would walk to early on, which was actually on our way home from her therapy center. It worked out pretty well. In case you're wondering where this is going, I'm just sort of giving you an overview of our experience with early intervention. James came along next, and James was the floppiest baby you've ever seen. You know how some babies, most babies, almost all babies, start to have control of their neck a little tiny bit by the time they're a few months old? That wasn't James. James was as floppy as he could possibly be. You had to support his head completely all the time when you were holding him. And I would give him tummy time. I remember just trying to pull his little hands up and get him to sit up, and his head would just lag totally back, like he had no muscle tone, no attempt to lift his own head at all. And so James started physical therapy when he was around 7 months old, and he qualified for like everything. And so he had physical therapist coming out, and then he also qualified for an early interventionist to come out around the time that Tessie was born. So around his 2nd birthday, he also qualified for both. He was hyper flexible, he had low tone, he didn't sit up until he was, I think, around 10 months old, and surprisingly he did walk close to 18 months old, which I was starting to get nervous because Tessie and James are only 20 months apart. I really was hoping that he was going to be able to walk by the time that she was born. You have to picture me. He was not walking 2 months before she was born, and I was very pregnant. So he was in physical therapy and had the early interventionist coming out when Tessie was born, and they were coming out all the while that I was pregnant. And she was born, and it was about when she was a month old, and the physical therapist was at our house, and our dog started barking and barking and barking and barking and barking because something had happened. Someone had walked by outside or something like that, and that was the kind of dog that she was. We were by Tessie. Tessie was in her bassinet. We were near her, and we both looked at her, and she did not even blink. She did not respond in any way to having heard the dog. And she looked at me and she was like, we might want to have her evaluated. Tessie was 3 months old when she was officially admitted to the early on program, and she failed her early intervention test spectacularly. Like, she qualified in every single category. When they did her evaluation, she basically just laid there and was completely unresponsive. They rang bells and blocks and hit blocks together and had these black and white toys that they put over her head because she should be able to track these toys at 3 months, and she just lay there. Later on, her early interventionist told me that they went back to the meeting and they were like, either this baby has a huge hearing problem and is basically deaf, or she has a major developmental delay. And that is how Tessie got into early intervention very, very early at 3 months. Now, I want to explain how I went from thinking, oh, it'll pass, don't worry about it, we don't need any extra help, we can do this on our own, to being very, very for early intervention, to being very for early testing, to telling anyone who will listen, if you have that question, if you have that inkling, ask. Get the testing. If you don't need it, you find out you don't need it and the question is answered and you don't have to worry anymore. But if you do need it, you found out as early as possible that you do need it, and you can start to learn and you can start to get those answers and you can start to get that help as soon as possible. For me, that comes from a place of realizing how much there was for me to learn, how much I could learn to help my kids with their individual problems. Because especially with early intervention and these programs, usually the therapists are coming to your home once a week or once every other week or once a month. When Tessie just graduated from early intervention a couple months ago, she was seeing her therapist once a month. And she would come out, she would ask me what I thought we needed to work on, and then she would give me strategies and teach me ways to work with whatever it was that Tessie really needed help with the most. And that's really amazing, having that professional help where you have someone who has done this, who has seen this, who's gone through it, where they can answer your questions and have someone else answer your questions if they don't know the answer. And they can help you learn how to communicate with your own child more effectively. And that, for me, is the other huge thing. I feel like Tessie has a much easier time than Maggie had at the same age. And I feel like Tessie is a much more relaxed child than Maggie was at the same age, because we have so many more tools. We understand so much more about alternative ways to communicate with Tessie than we did when Maggie was 2 and just 3. At the age Tessie's at right now, Maggie still hadn't had a single day of therapy. She still hadn't been evaluated by anyone. And she still wouldn't be for a few more months. I was just starting to have questions about her right now. Whereas Tessie at this point has been in therapy for well over a year. She has so many tools to communicate with us and tell us what's on her mind and what she wants. For me, I strongly discourage people from taking the wait and see approach. It can be hugely detrimental to your child. You might wait till they get to kindergarten and find out that honestly they should have been in speech for the last 5 years. That is one of the many reasons why early intervention is hugely important. If you find yourself asking, does my child need early intervention? Is this normal? I'd say Google early intervention in my state or early intervention near me and see what comes up, and see if you can get an evaluation, or talk to your pediatrician and see what is available in your area, because it can make an enormous difference. It can be really life-changing both for you and for your child. I know that without a doubt it definitely was for our family. That is it for today. If you like this video, we would love it if you'd give it a thumbs up, and if you're interested in all things autism, we'd love it if you'd hit subscribe. And I'll see you tomorrow. Bye.